I want to start by saying I'm not a paranoid person. I don't believe in coincidences that mean something. I don't look for patterns where there aren't any, and I've never in my life told a story like this before. I'm telling it now because it still bothers me, 2 years later, and because I've never found a satisfying explanation for what happened. It was July. I was doing a solo cross-country drive from Charlotte to Flagstaff. A new job, a fresh start, the kind of trip that's supposed to feel like freedom. I had 4 days, no real schedule, and a cooler full of gas station food in the back seat. I picked up I-40 West outside of Amarillo, Texas. Wide open country, flat in every direction, the kind of drive where you set the cruise control and let your mind go quiet. I was maybe 2 hours in when I first noticed the car, a dark green Honda Accord. Older model, mid-2000s maybe. It was behind me in the right lane, hanging back about a quarter mile. I noticed it the way you notice anything on an empty highway. Just a shape in the mirror, something to register and forget. But I didn't forget it. 30 miles later, it was still there. Same distance. I sped up slightly. Not a test, just restless. And a few minutes later, it was still a quarter mile back. Same distance. I told myself it was nothing. Same direction, same speed, same highway. That's just traffic. I stopped in Santa Rosa for gas and a bathroom break. Pulled into a Love's Travel stop off exit 275. Walked inside, got a coffee, took my time. I was in there maybe 15 minutes. When I pulled back out onto the eastbound on-ramp, force of habit, wrong direction, I corrected immediately. I saw it. The green Accord, parked at the far pump. Engine off. Nobody getting out. I told myself it was a different car. There are thousands of green Accords. I merged back onto I-40 West and kept going. An hour later, outside of Moriarty, it was behind me again. Or it had never left. I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. I watched it in my mirror for miles. It never got closer, never fell further back. Whenever I changed lanes, it changed lanes. Not immediately. There was always a delay, 30 seconds, a minute, just long enough that it didn't look deliberate. But it always matched me. I pulled off at a rest stop outside of Edgewood, parked, got out, stretched. I watched the highway. 3 cars passed, then a 4th. The green Accord didn't pass. I waited 10 minutes, got back in the car, pulled back onto the highway. 2 miles later, it was behind me again. I want to be clear about how that felt. It wasn't like a jump scare. It wasn't sudden or loud. It was quiet and slow and wrong in the way that something is wrong when you can't find the specific rule it's breaking. Like a face that's almost right but not quite. Your brain knows before you do. I called my buddy Marcus from the road, told him what was happening. He laughed at first, told me I'd been driving too long. I was starting to see things. But I described the car again, the pattern, the rest stop, and he got quieter. Just get off the highway, he said. Take a different route for a while. I took US 60 South toward Mountain Air, wound through the Estancia Valley, empty 2-lane road, totally different terrain. I watched my mirrors the whole time. No green Accord. I started to breathe again. Marcus was right. Too long in the car, too much open road, pattern recognition running overtime. I gave it 45 minutes on 60, then looped back up to I-40 near Tijeras. I merged onto the interstate, and there it was. Same car, same distance, right lane. I don't remember making the decision, I just did it. I hit the brakes hard, dropped from 75 to about 30 in a few seconds. The car behind me, a pickup, swerved, and laid on the horn. I pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. I watched the green Accord in my mirror. It slowed down. It pulled onto the shoulder about 200 yards behind me, and it stopped. We sat there, both of us, on the shoulder of I-40, engines running, neither one moving. I don't know how long it was. It felt like a long time. Trucks blew past us, on rocking both cars with the wind draft. The sun was going down ahead of me, turning the highway orange. Then the Accord pulled back onto the road and drove past me. I watched it go. As it passed, I tried to see inside. The windows were tinted, darker than legal, I think, and all I could make out was a shape in the driver's seat. Just a shape. One person. They didn't look over. The car drove away and disappeared over a rise. I sat on the shoulder for another 20 minutes before I could make myself drive again. I made it to Albuquerque that night and stayed at a Marriott downtown. I deadbolted the door and didn't open it until morning. I kept thinking about that moment on the shoulder. Both of us stopped, waiting. What was that? A coincidence that finally ran out of road? And someone who saw me brake hard and pulled over to make sure I was okay? Someone who wanted me to know they'd seen me see them? I finished the drive to Flagstaff the next morning. Different route, daylight the whole way. I never saw the green Accord again. I still think about it though. Specifically, I think about the tinted windows, about how I couldn't see in, about the fact that for almost 3 hours, somewhere between Texas and New Mexico, something was watching me and I had no way of knowing what it was. That's the part that stays. The not knowing. I've driven Highway 191 through Montana a dozen times. It cuts straight through the Big Sky, past the Gallatin National Forest, through miles of nothing but open land and the occasional truck stop. I know that road the way I know my own bedroom, or I thought I did. This was 2 Octobers ago. I was driving back to Bozeman from my sister's place in Salt Lake City, solo, which I'd done plenty of times before. Left around noon, figured I'd be home before midnight. Just me, a half-full thermos of coffee, and a playlist I'd been saving for long drives. Everything was fine until around mile marker 231. I saw her on the shoulder of the road, a woman standing completely still, facing away from traffic. She was wearing a light gray coat, way too thin for October in Montana, and she had no bags, no car nearby, nothing. Just standing there in the dark. I almost didn't stop. I want to be honest about that. There's a voice in your head on those long night drives, a voice that says, "Keep going. You don't know who that is. Don't stop." But it was 38 degrees outside, and she was alone, and I couldn't just leave her there. I pulled over about 30 feet ahead of her and put on my hazards. In my rearview mirror, I watched her turn around slowly. She walked toward my car without hurrying. That part was strange to me even then. No relief on her face, no urgency, just a steady, unhurried walk. She got in the passenger seat. Up close, she was maybe mid-40s. Dark hair, pale skin, and her eyes. I don't know how to describe it exactly. They were focused on something that wasn't in the car, like she was watching something through the windshield that I couldn't see. "Where are you headed?" I asked. She said, "North." Just that. North. I told her I was going to Bozeman, that I could drop her somewhere along the way. She nodded and looked back out the windshield. I pulled back onto the highway. For the first few minutes, neither of us said anything. I turned down my music. The silence felt heavy in a way I couldn't explain. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but loaded, like the air before a thunderstorm. Then she spoke. "You shouldn't stop for people on this road at night." I gave a short laugh. "I couldn't just leave you there." She didn't respond to that. Just said, "This stretch of road, between 220 and 240. You shouldn't stop here." I looked over at her. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she was still staring forward. Are you okay?" I asked. "My daughter stopped here," she said. 3 years ago, she saw someone on the shoulder and she stopped." I felt something shift in my chest. "What happened?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. The headlights lit up the broken center line coming at us, the dark tree line on either side, the infinite nothing of that October highway. "They never found her car," she finally said. "Just her phone, face down in the gravel, 40 feet off the shoulder." I didn't know what to say. I told her I was sorry, and I meant it. A few miles passed. I kept checking my mirrors without thinking about it, some animal instinct ticking on. The road was empty behind us, empty ahead. "Do you do this often?" I asked. "Stand out there and warn people?" She turned to look at me for the first time, and the look on her face. It wasn't sad. It wasn't angry. It was something closer to tired, like a person who has been trying to explain the same thing for a very long time and no longer expects to be understood. "Every October," she said, "the anniversary." I nodded slowly. I understood then, or thought I did, a grieving mother, doing the only thing that felt like action, standing on the road where her daughter disappeared, warning strangers. I reached over and turned my heat up. "I'm glad you're doing this," I said. "I'm glad I stopped." She didn't answer. 15 minutes later, I pulled off at the rest stop near Meadow Village. I told her I needed 2 minutes. Restroom, stretch my legs. I asked if she wanted anything from the vending machine. She shook her head. I was inside for maybe 3 minutes. When I came back out, my car was exactly where I'd left it, hazard still blinking. The passenger seat was empty. I stood there for a second, just looking at the seat. I checked the restrooms, both empty. The parking lot had one other car, a semi idling at the far end. I walked around to the other side of my car. Nothing. I got back in and sat there for a moment. The heat was still running. The seat was warm. Her side of the windshield had a faint fog to it, the kind your breath leaves. I drove the rest of the way to Bozeman without music. When I got home, I did the only logical thing I could think of. I searched the news, missing persons, Highway 191, Montana. I was telling myself I'd find nothing, that she was just a grieving woman who wandered off while I wasn't looking. I found an article from 3 years ago. A 24-year-old woman from Billings. I disappeared on US 191 in October. Her phone was found in the gravel off the shoulder. Her car was never recovered. Her name was Danny Marsh. The article had a photo of her mother. A woman with dark hair, pale skin, and eyes that seemed to be watching something no one else could see. I've driven 191 a few times since then. I always check my mirrors between mile markers 220 and 240. And I never stop on that stretch of road. Not anymore. There's a rule that people who grow up in rural Louisiana seem to know without ever being taught. You don't stop in towns you don't recognize after dark. You keep your tank full before the sun goes down. And if somebody flags you down on a back road at night, you keep driving. You don't slow down. You don't roll your window down. You keep your eyes forward and your foot steady on the gas. Nobody told me that rule. And honestly, nobody needed to, because nobody expected me to end up lost on US 84 at 11:30 on a February night, running on fumes and a wrong turn I still can't fully explain. The trip started fine. My buddy Craig's wedding up in Shreveport. Good food, open bar, the kind of night that blurs at the edges in all the best ways. My plan was to drive straight back to New Orleans rather than booking a hotel. 4.5 hours, an easy drive. I'd done it before. Somewhere around Natchitoches, though, my GPS just quit on me. Not the usual dead zone flicker that fixes itself after a mile. The screen went gray and stayed gray, and somewhere in that blind stretch, I made a wrong turn I didn't catch until the road around me looked nothing like anything I'd planned. 2 lanes, no streetlights, pine trees pressing in tight on both sides, and the only sign of civilization was the occasional weathered mailbox disappearing in my rear view. The first gas station appeared around 11:15. A small place with no chain name, no logo, just a hand-painted white sign that said "Fuel" in faded red letters. 2 pumps under a single overhead bulb. The kind of place that feels like it exists slightly outside of time. A man was standing beside the near pump. Like, he wasn't pumping gas. He wasn't doing anything really. Just standing there with his arms crossed, watching the road. When my headlight swept over him, he didn't move. Didn't blink, didn't wave, didn't look away. He just watched me drive past. Now, I know that's not inherently strange. People stand outside. People zone out. But there was something about the absolute stillness of him. The way he showed zero reaction to a car pulling up in the dead of night, that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up in that old animal way, the way your body knows something before your brain does. My gauge was showing a quarter tank, enough to keep going. So I kept going. 15 minutes later, my GPS was still dark. The tank was edging toward an 1/8, and the math was getting uncomfortable. Then the road curved, and there was another station ahead. Bigger this time. A proper metal canopy over 4 pumps. A small convenience store attached on the right. A red open sign glowing in the window. It looked completely normal. The kind of place you'd pull into without a second thought on a Tuesday afternoon. So I pulled in, parked at the second pump, stepped out, and immediately felt it. Something about the air was wrong. I know how that sounds, and I'm not sure how else to describe it, but you know how a gas station at night usually sounds? The low hum of the lights, maybe a radio bleeding through from inside, some distant highway noise. This one had the hum and the glow, but everything else was gone. No sound from the store, no traffic on the road, no wind in the trees. The silence had a weight to it, like pressure building behind the ears. The card reader accepted my card. The pump started. I stood there watching the numbers and telling myself I was just tired from the long drive. Then the store door opened. A woman came out, maybe 60, heavy-set, moving with surprising purpose for her age. She walked straight across the lot toward me without hesitating and stopped about 4 feet away, close enough that I could see her face clearly under the pump light. "You don't want to stay here long," she said. Not loud, not a whisper, just direct. the voice of someone saying exactly what they mean. "Just stopping for gas," I told her. "I'll be out in a minute." She glanced at the pump, then back at me, and her expression didn't change. "There's a man who works this stretch of road," she said. "Has been for years. He waits for people traveling alone at night, strangers who don't know the area, people whose cars look out of place." She paused for just a beat. "Last August, a young woman stopped here by herself, came inside to use the restroom." Another pause. "We found her car still at the pump the next morning." The nozzle clicked. Full tank. My hands were already moving, pulling the card, replacing the nozzle, reaching for the gas cap, before my brain had even fully processed what she'd said. "Get back on 84 East," she said. "Don't exit until you see the overpass for I-49. Between here and there, don't stop. Not for a red light, not for someone standing in the road, not for anything. You just keep driving." I looked at her face. There was something in it I keep coming back to even now. Not panic, not drama, something quieter and heavier than that. The look of someone who has tried to explain the same thing too many times and long since stopped expecting it to land. "What about you?" The question came out before I thought about it. "Is it safe here? For you?" Something shifted in her expression. Not quite fear, but something older than fear, something closer to resignation. "I know how to handle it," she said. Then she turned, walked back inside, and the door closed behind her. The lock turned. In all that silence, the sound was very loud. I got back in my car and pulled out onto 84 East. Foot down, music off. Just me and the road and the dark pressing in from both sides. The next 40 minutes were the longest of my life. Every set of headlights coming the other way made my chest tighten. Every gap in the tree line looked like somewhere a person could stand and wait. Around the 20-minute mark, my GPS flickered back to life. The little blue arrow reappearing like nothing had happened, like it hadn't just left me blind out there for an hour. I almost laughed out loud. The I-49 overpass came up, and I took the exit without slowing down. Back in New Orleans around 2 in the morning, I sat in my car in the parking garage for a solid 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I don't really know why. I just needed to sit there and let everything settle. I told the story a few times in the weeks after. Friends listened, offered the reasonable explanations. A local woman who'd seen too much, rural Louisiana being what it is, an overactive imagination after a long night on the road. All probably true, all reasonable. But here's the part that hasn't left me. About 3 weeks after that drive, I came across a short news item. A man's body had been found in a drainage canal off US 84 in Wynn Parish. The right stretch of road, the right window of time. No identification. Cause of death undetermined. 2 paragraphs on a local news site. The kind of story that doesn't travel far. That part's probably coincidence. The part that isn't. When I got curious and looked up the gas station, the one with the canopy, 4 pumps, the red open sign, I found that there are only 3 stations on that section of US 84 between Natchitoches and the I-49 interchange. None of them are open past 9 p.m. None of them have been open past 9 p.m. for at least 4 years. And not one of them is run by a woman. I've driven a lot of long roads since that night, but I've never gone back through that stretch of Louisiana. And whenever my tank starts running low after dark, I always think about that pump light and that woman's face and that lock turning in the silence. I fill up. every time, before the sun goes down.